What if I told you I could send you to a place where you are guaranteed a chance at an Atlantic salmon on a fly? A place where Lee Wulff spent many years and flew his plane into every year. And you could fish the same runs and stay in the same place in the same area where Lee hooked massive Atlantic salmon. This is also a river where you have more success fishing flies on the surface than below the surface. Today, you're going to find out where this is and how to put it all together this season. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing Podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and outfitters than just about anyone out there. Today, I have head owner and head guides of Mountain Waters Resort on this podcast. Ryan, Les, and Rod are going to take us back into history and up to present day fishing Newfoundland. You're going to find out how Lee Wulff ran his operation here out of Portland Creek back in the day. We're going to find out how to fish the riffle hitch, why you shouldn't step down on a run instead of doing the step down swinging method. You actually need to stay in these pools in the same spot. And we're going to find out why 4-pound tippet is used during certain times of the year here, and why breaking off fish is something that they focus on occasionally. Plus, you're going to find out how to set the hook on a giant Atlantic salmon. Newfoundland, Lee Wulff, salmon, brook trout, it's all here today. Let's get into it. Ryan, Les, and Rod from Mountain Waters Resort.ca. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Dave.
Yeah, doing really good, Dave. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to do a quick little round of introductions, but today we're going to talk about a topic that, I think a lot of people are interested in. We love talking about, I think we're going to talk surface a little bit, but we got salmon fishing, Atlantic salmon. We're going to probably touch on brook trout. We're going to discuss the lodge where you guys are located at up in Canada. And we recently had a guest on, Calvin. Shout out to Calvin. And he fished with you guys, and he was so excited. He let me know, sent me some photos. So I'm hoping that we can maybe get up there eventually. But today we're just going to shed light on what you do. So let's start with just a round of intros. And maybe, Ryan, we'll start with you. Just to tell us kind of who you are, maybe how you came to be connected to the lodge.
Yeah, sure. So appreciate it, Dave. Appreciate you taking the time to hook us up here today. A lot of rich history and good fishing at this resort. The history for me, at a very young age, I believe I was 8 or 9 years old. My parents, Les and Paulette Wentzell, and two other couples from Portland Creek and Daniels Arbor area on the west coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, ended up purchasing a 170-acre property that was formerly owned, as many of your listeners would know, by Lee Wulff. So at a very young age for me, being in around this place and seeing the old structures still in some form, and then my parents and their partners subsequently turned it into a campground RV resort style setting. So I grew up in here. I grew up around Dad and Rod and many anglers alike on the river here, which is just in from the Atlantic Ocean here on the west coast of the island, and had the opportunity to see some very large salmon caught over these years, and experienced some great times with clients from all over the world, as far away as Germany, New York, San Francisco, and so I was raised up in here. And back in 2019, after nearly 30 years of operation, my parents and the other couples kind of went into retirement mode, I'll call it. My parents ended up signing the property over to myself. So over the last 5 years, we've took the property and kind of upgraded it even more, to the point where over the last couple of years, we've had anglers come in from all over the U.S. and outside Canada and the U.S. as well. As you mentioned, Calvin, he's been here twice, and he's had quite the good run. So I'm going to just turn it over. That's how I came to be involved in the operation.
Yep.
And my dad and Rod, they'll fill you in on some of Calvin's experiences, I'm sure.
Yeah, great. We'll jump into that, and we're going to jump around a little bit today. But like we said, the focus is going to be on, salmon fishing. And I think Calvin mentioned some of the surface stuff and the riffle hitch and things like that. But why don't we go, Les? Why don't we go to you? You owned the lodge for quite a while. Maybe talk about your experience. Maybe take us back on you. How did you get into fly fishing early in your life, or did it come after you purchased the lodge, or how'd that look?
Yeah, I basically grew up next door to the operation of Mountain Waters Resort. Back in the day, it was, as Ryan said, pre-owned by Lee Wulff back in the 40s. And then there was a couple of more companies that purchased that place after Lee was finished with it. And they ended up passing it on to the Anglican Church for $1. And it sat stagnant there for about 30 years. And it was just getting to be run down. Nobody was running the operation for all those years. So in 1989, we just approached the church with a bunch of money and said we'd like to purchase that property. And we we got it. So we got 170 acres, as Ryan said, on both sides of the river, so much around each side of the lake and all the way to the high water mark at the ocean. And myself and Rod can talk about it later. We grew up on the river. We would walk into that river when there was basically very little access to the river and lake, except for coming up the river itself, which hardly anybody would do. So in our younger days, when we went in there fishing, there would be lots of Americans in there at the time fishing because it was an operation at that time. So over the years, of course, as Ryan said, seen a lot of fish there. A lot of fish have went through that place. And again, this year, there was quite a number of fish that went through. And just a couple of days ago, when I left to go on a little trip here, they were still jumping. And my grandson was on the river about 4 days ago, and he hooked a fish between 25 and 30 pounds.
Wow.
So an excited grandson, needless to say. And it's been a great venture. And Atlantic salmon is at the top of the list for us, of course, but the trout also can be very, very good as well.
What's the town where you're closest to where you're located?
The town's called Daniels Arbor.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a little town of probably 225 people right now. It used to be bigger. There was a mine there at one time, and that ran for almost 20 years. Shut down back in the early 90s. So, the operation is, the last 2 years, as Ryan said, we've put some effort into it for bringing people back in fishing like it was done back in the day. And back then, there was also a 4,000-foot strip on that property where they would land DC-3 airplanes and bring people in from Gander, Newfoundland, which was an international airport back in the day. And they'd bring them in there and fish, and they all had good times. Yeah.
Wow. And you guys are on essentially an island. Maybe describe that a little bit, how this is different than, say, because we've done some episodes on New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, some stuff up north, but we haven't talked about specifically the area that you are. How is it different from some of these other areas?
Well, we are on an island, Dave. We're on the island of Newfoundland. It's called Newfoundland and Labrador. Labrador, of course, being on the mainland part of Canada. And if you go to the northern tip of Newfoundland, it's basically 9 miles across to what we call the mainland, which would be the rest of Canada.
Yeah.
If you go to the far east side of the island, then it's like 1,200 miles or whatever over to Ireland, England.
Wow.
So it's quite a distance that way. But yeah, Newfoundland is completely surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, and the bulk of Atlantic salmon that come up that way, there's lots of rivers on Newfoundland Island, and that's where a lot of them report to, of course.
Gotcha. Cool. And let's jump in with Rod real quick, and then we'll jump into some more on the history and some of the fishing. But Rod, why don't you introduce yourself? How did you come to connect with this amazing operation?
Well, Dave, as Les said, I grew up in a small community just north of us, and I spent 57 years on this river fishing Atlantic salmon, and all over Newfoundland and along Labrador. But I have to say, this would be my favorite place to fish. You get a lot of big salmon. We had this summer a lot of fish from 10 to 15 and a few from 15 to 20 plus. So it's been a great year for large fish. I've caught fish here like 25 pounds. This year, before I went guiding, we had a number of fish that was 12, 15 pounds. And we're only a mile from the ocean, so those salmon are pretty they're pretty aggressive when they come in the river.
Right, and that's coming in like the Gulf of, is that the Gulf of St. Lawrence? Is that the area where they're coming through?
Yes, they come in up to right from we're approximately a mile of river from the lake to the ocean. So our salmon, when they come in, are pretty fresh right out of the ocean.
Gotcha.
And of course, the Portland hitch, the riffling hitch you spoke about, was developed there at Portland Creek. We call it the Portland hitch, and that was developed there. And you get the surface, so you get a visual of the salmon rather than fishing underneath the surface. So that adds a thrill to it for most fishermen, for sure. Calvin, as you said, was there, and I think he had an awesome week. A lot of big fish.
Yeah, and he was mentioning that was something, the riffle hitch. Maybe we can talk about that. I want to get into the history, but let's just jump into some fishing real quick. Maybe, Rod, you can keep going on this track. So, let's just talk about when Calvin was there, and maybe just in general, people come in. Does it change throughout the year as far as when you're using the dry fly, on the surface versus, maybe down below the surface? Talk about that. When is the good time to hit those on the surface?
I use the surface fishing all year and use dry flies, which are bombers now. One time it was back white wolves and things like that. Rarely used anymore. But the bombers also did float surface fishing. So it's all visual, like for the salmon when he comes for the fly. And I use the hitch the whole year, right from June to end of August. The trail and rising of fish with a surface fishing with the riffling hitch is more exciting than if you were fishing a foot below the surface.
Yeah, because you're seeing the fish. I was just this last week. I was on. Actually, I'm on the West Coast, the other side from you guys, and I was fishing steelhead, and I had a fish. Summer steelhead. We talked a lot about this on the podcast, but summer steelhead are more similar to Atlantic salmon because of the activity, and you can get them on the surface too. But I had a fish that was a player and it was playing around with the fly. Maybe describe what the riffle hitch is. Why use a riffle hitch and why not use some other knot there? Describe what it is and maybe how you fish the bomber.
The bomber, we don't use a hitch. It's just tied straight onto your leader. And we did float the bomber. That's the most success you will have at any rivers I've fished. And it's just a dead drift. And of course, when the salmon come for that, they come up, and sometimes you see 8-10 inches of that fish when he rises for that bomber. Now, the whip fly, we use a riffling hitch, which is just an half hitch taken over the eye of the fly, and it just brings a small portion, just the eye of the fly is what's rippling across the surface. And some fish will come like so aggressive, you see the whole fish when it comes at the fly. I had a 12 and a 15 pounder one day this year, and it was unbelievable how aggressive those fish are coming for a fly that's skating across the water like that. The hitch would be tied directly underneath the eye of the fly. Back in the days of Lee Wulff, and as you know, probably the hook itself was just a straight shank. And when you tie your fly, there was a piece of leader catgut tied into that. And that's what you would attach to your leader. Does that make sense, Dave, what I'm saying?
Not totally. Yeah, maybe describe that a little bit I guess we're talking back in the day. I mean, is the technique you're doing now describing the same thing that Lee Wulff was doing back in the day?
This is where, so it was a straight shank, no eye on the fly at all. So when a tyer would tie, you would tie in a piece of catgut leader, and that would make an eye to attach your line to.
Oh, yeah. I know.
All right?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, yeah, it had no eye, so you used the catgut to make the eye of the hook.
When the locals were given some flies by fishermen who they guided, they were hooking lots of big fish back there. And eventually that thing would pull out of the tie, and they would lose the fish. So somebody, in their wisdom, decided to put 2 half hitches over the shank of the fly to prevent any torque on that catgut. And that caused the fly to come to the surface of the water and make a wake across, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, it does. So what you're saying is they did that back in the day, basically to not lose fish, but essentially that's how the riffle hitch created it. The way it was, the riffle hitch created a more effective way to fish the fly, essentially.
Yes, for sure. For fishing a wet fly,
compared to just doing a wet fly. Like you could go put on a traditional wet fly, just a regular knot, open clinch knot or something, and fish that. But it sounds like what you're talking about for these fish, it's better to use the riffle hitch or the bomber.
I do not use a riffling hitch on a bomber.
Not on a bomber, but just on a riffle hitch on a wet fly.
For sure.
Like that's better than fishing just a straight wet fly swing.
We have tried sinking tips, fishing without the hitch, and you'll still catch some salmon. But to be consistent, you have to use that riffling hitch, in my opinion.
Right. And what is the riffling? Is it riffle hitch or riffling hitch?
The riffling, a lot of people call it. We call it the Portland hitch, but it's the riffling hitch. Yes.
Yeah.
And they have just nobody knows what guy decided to do this back in the days of Lee Wulff, but it was somebody in their wisdom. They were losing flies, and where we live, flies weren't easy to come by. So if they were given a fly, they like to retain it as long as possible. And we were getting fish back then. The largest fish recorded on Portland Creek was 40 pounds. And on the same day, there was a 35-pounder caught.
Wow.
So those are big fish, as you know.
When was that? Was that back in the Lee Wulff days?
That was back in just after the Lee Wulff days, yep. Back in the early 50s.
Yep.
We still get fish 25 pounds. Just had one a couple of years ago. And most of these fish, if they tend to go back to the river, you tend to lose most of the big ones. That's always a fishing story, but it's true.
Right.
This year I had one client who a large fish, and he had 250 yards of backing, which is what I would recommend. And we ran out of line. So it was a large fish, so it busted.
Gone. What's your, and we're going to switch over maybe back to some of that Lee Wulff history, but Rod, talk about what's a fly, what's a popular pattern you'd be using with that riffling hitch?
I'm speaking personally, and I use the Undertaker, and the Blue Charm would probably be the two most popular flies that I would use all season long.
Perfect.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the patterns, but the original Blue Charm, which has been around for a lifetime, and then some. Number 8 would be the popular size, but we do use number 12s. This year we had low water conditions, so we were down to a number 12. But I use as large as a number 4, as small as a number 12, depending on water conditions.
Imagine your perfect cast in the pristine waters of Bristol Bay, the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. Togiak Lodge sits in this unique paradise, offering unmatched fishing amidst breathtaking landscapes. Envision yourself right now amidst nature's best, with every fish narrating its own epic tale. You can visit togiaklodge.com right now. That's Togiak, Togiak. Your story woven into the fabric of Bristol Bay, where every cast is a memory, every fish is unforgettable. Dreaming of battling a giant rainbow trout in Alaska's untouched rivers? Turn that dream into a reality with FishHound Expeditions. Immerse yourself in the heart of Alaska, where epic landscapes and legendary fish await. Visit fishhoundexpeditions.com and mention this podcast to begin your adventure. FishHound Expeditions, your gateway to the ultimate Alaskan fishing experience. So we got a little taste there of the riffle hitch and why this place is so unique that you're seeing the fish come up, which is amazing. Let's turn it back to the history. I'm not sure, Ryan or Les, if you guys want to talk about the history. I'd love to hear about Lee Wulff. He's such a huge figure in fly fishing. We've had Joan Wolfe on the podcast, and his name has come up a lot. But maybe talk about what you guys know about those days. What was it like when Lee Wulff? Do you know the history of how Lee Wulff came into this area?
Well, Dad, I think you can go ahead on that one.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So,
Dave, just to interrupt for a second, 7 years ago, Lee Wulff's son came by. He was doing a documentary of his dad's journey in Newfoundland. And I actually met him here on the river, Allen. And I don't know what happened, if the documentary is out, but he was doing an old documentary on his dad's fishing experiences in Newfoundland.
That's awesome. Do you know if that documentary ever is it out there?
I can't find it anywhere. I have no idea where it went.
Yeah. What's his son's name?
Alan, that guy was. He had two, Alan and Barry. And they basically grew up in the small community where we lived.
Okay. So maybe we'll try to track that down, see if it's out there. And if we can find it, we'll put a link in the show notes.
That would be great.
Good. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, Les, did you want to talk a little about the history there, what you know about Lee Wulff and more of that back in the day?
Yeah, sure. So from my recollection and talking to the older people before me, he basically flew his float plane from New York and came up to a place called Bombay, which is about maybe 80 kilometers, 90 kilometers south of where the park is right now, the mountain waters. And he brought his little float plane right there and used that as his base. He started flying out of there and he started checking out all the rivers and lakes and everything around that area and to the north. So, of course, that's eventually how we approached Portna Creek and 3 or 4 more places around the area. And he set up cabins in those places, of course, with some financial help back in the day from the Newfoundland government, because they also wanted to promote tourism and the fishing. So he ended up going up to Labrador with the plane. It was just a small little cub on floats. He's actually got some videos. I'm sure you've seen some of those on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And he set up that operation. That was the biggest operation he had, was Portna Creek at the time on the west coast. And that thing ran for, well, he basically ran it from in the 40s to 1956 when the road came through that area. Before that, there was no highway. So it was pretty remote. And once the road came through, he was basically pretty well done with that then. He just sold out and moved on, you might say.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, once the road came in, he's out of there.
That's right. He was over there, yeah. And the road that did come down at the time, it didn't come right to that property, but it was pretty close. And I guess for him, the sense of remoteness was gone, and he went on to whatever he went on to after that, bigger ventures or whatever. But he was, as you know, an avid fisherman. And even back at that time, he was promoting the hook and release of fish.
Oh, he was?
He was, for sure.
Back then, was he fishing a standard, like a 9-foot 8-weight? Do you know what the rod was? How is it different than what you guys fish now?
It was pretty much a lot the same lines as the type of rods. Not quite the quality we got right now, I'm sure, but a lot of split bamboo maybe. And he had the short rods for the trout and the longer rods for the salmon. And he also used the short rods on the salmon, because one thing he did say was, if you catch a fish on a long rod, you get to play the fish. If you get a salmon on a short rod, the fish turns the tables and plays you. And there's some truth to that.
Yeah. So he was using a long rod, like a spay rod, like a long belly spay, a 15-foot type rod, something like that?
No, I don't think he ever used a spay rod. I think most he used was single hand, 8.5, 9-foot rod.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And are you into fishing the spay game? I think Calvin might have been talking about that, but do you cover spay and single hand rods?
We use all the locos in the area, and we just use all single hand for the most part. There's the odd guy who'll use the switch rod, and some spay rods around, of course, but not too many as regards to local guys. So, but a lot of people that's coming in, they use the spay and the switch, and I think a lot of that originates from the steelhead, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, we kind of grew up with the single hand, and we kind of like the single hand in a way, because what we find with the single hand when we're casting is when that line goes out, it just flatly falls on the water. With the roll cast like that, the spay rod with the roll cast, you're getting that line stripping all the way across the water as it's getting laid down. So that in itself, is a bit of disturbance for the fish.
Oh, right. You might be spooking the fish a little bit. I guess you could do, I guess if you had a long belly sort of thing, You could do something like that. But no, it's interesting because I always love this conversation, because when I grew up fishing steelhead on the West Coast, my dad was a big steelhead single-hand guide too, so I always fished a single-hand rod. But the challenge was, back where we were fishing, we had to make long casts.
Yep.
And there was wind too, so it was very challenging. And then once the spay came in, it basically opened up for everybody. Now you didn't have to be a great caster to fish for steelhead. Now everybody could do it. Do you guys feel like your rivers are like kind of smaller and you don't need to make the long cast, or is casting challenging there?
Yeah, well, Portland Creek River is pretty big river and is no problem for roll cast, spay cast. It's got the water to do that. Then some of the other rivers are smaller and you don't do that, of course. And one thing we find with the Atlantic salmon in our area is 90% of catching a salmon has a lot to do with the presentation of that fly.
Yeah, presentation.
That's right.
What does that look like when you're... Yeah, go ahead.
Dave, just to interrupt, Lee Wulff's first guide here was Arthur Perry. He's a good friend of the family. He guided Lee Wulff his first trip to Portland Creek, and he met them on a Mr. Parsons actually brought him from Bombay in a boat, and Arthur and his brother lived at the mouth of the Portland Creek River in a cabin, and so that's where he met Arthur, and they were fishing at the sea pool. And I don't know if you've read the book that his son wrote, but it talks about fishing for a while, and Arthur told him you won't catch a fish because you're not using the Portland hitch, the riffling hitch. And he said, coincidence or not, but he did hook 2 large fish within 10 minutes after using the riffling hitch.
Yep. And what that does is, like you said, without that, the fly just kind of swings down in the surface film. But with that, it just basically gets their attention. Is that kind of what it does?
Dave, is a hell of a lot more exciting when you see a 15 or 20 pounder come to the surface for a fly.
Yeah. Do you guys still, when you're doing that, using the riffle hitch, do you see a lot of fish coming up and seeing the fish and not taking, or touching it and not taking, or do they usually, you see them and they take it?
Yes, sometimes the fish will rise for the fly 8-10 times and not touch it.
Right.
That happens on many occasions.
And is the general thinking there, you just put the same cast back to the exact same spot and just keep doing it until it takes?
Yes, exactly. I talked to Calvin the first year he came, and the first fish he had hooked, I was fishing at the time and he came, was supposed to start the next day, and I raised a big fish. So I got Calvin out, and I gave him my rod, and I said, the fish is right here at this length of line. So we tried for a couple of minutes, and I said, just give it one more foot. Maybe he came upstream a bit, because these fish lie wherever they lie. That's where they stay for the day, 2 days, maybe there for a week. And if he's lying by a boulder, and Calvin gave it one more foot of line, and he was amazed when he hooked that fish. Just 1 foot of line made all the difference. So the presentation, like Les said, is very important. Knowing the river, where to fish, where the fish lie, and they've been doing that for the 50-plus years I've been here. This river has very, very minor changes with ice conditions coming out in the springtime. So the fish lie in the same place every year after year after year.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So you can basically go back and pretty much fish a run that Lee Wulff probably caught a fish on. Do you know some of those runs?
Oh, my God, yes, for sure. We've got different names of different places in the river, and where Lee Wulff used to fish, and of course some are more popular than others, but it's all Lee Wulff waters, most of the fishing we do. We do fish to take clients to other rivers. We've got rivers just north of us. That's only about 40 minutes drive, maybe. And the trout fishing is up. We take the boat and go up the lake. We can go approximately 14 miles, 2 different lakes. And the scenery is gorgeous. And the fishing for trout fishing has been unbelievable. They caught trout this year like 3.5, 4 pounds, and they were totally amazed by it.
Right.
This trout fishing was using a salmon fly like the Undertaker or the Blue Charm, and we weren't actually trout fishing when we caught these trout. And they had, I think there was 2 guys that had trout license, which is required for a non-resident. And they actually caught their limit of trout with 5 trout. And that's 5 pounds plus 1 trout. And they wanted to retain some trout for the girls who were at the lodge to cook. So we kept a couple of trout for that purpose. And they were big trout.
And these are brook trout, right?
Yes, brook trout. And they're really good fun on a 6-weight or 4-weight bamboo.
Nice. I want to hear about, maybe Ryan, you could tell us about a little about getting there. Do people, I'm not sure what Calvin did when he came up there, but are people actually driving out there, or are they mostly flying in? Talk about that. If somebody's like, say, down in the, U.S., how are they getting up there?
Yeah, so we have an airport here, Dave, Deer Lake Regional Airport. It's approximately 180 kilometers south, about a 2-hour drive from the airport to here. You pass through Gros Morne National Park. So it's a beautiful drive through the mountains and around actually the area of Bombay. And you can look over to a place that's called Lomond, where in some of Lee Wulff's videos, you can actually see him taking off in his float plane and heading north up towards Portland Creek. So that airport, there's flights that arrive there from mostly what we're seeing is connections through Toronto, Ontario.
Sure.
So clients usually will jump on in San Francisco or Chicago or New York, and then obviously get the connecting flight in Toronto that goes directly to Deer Lake. So when the clients arrive in Deer Lake, usually it's an afternoon flight or a late evening flight. We pick them up at a hotel or at the airport, depending on the time they get in, and stop with them to pick up any, snacks or any specialties they may want. And as, like I say, a short 2-hour drive north. And then subsequently they're introduced to Dad and Rod on site, and the staff here that look after their accommodations and meals. And usually they're fortunate enough, most of them get fishing on Sunday as soon as they get here. And then they'll fish for right through till the following Saturday. So 6 days in total, and a bit more if they inclined to do it on the Sunday they arrive, obviously. So we try to maximize as much time as we can for them. But yeah, in relation to the transportation, you can also get here by ferry. If someone, we've had clients that have took to automobile and came up that way. The thing is with that route, obviously it's from start to finish, you're looking at maybe 10 hours on the Marine Atlantic ferry from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland. So what we're seeing is most people choose to fly, and popular carriers range from Air Canada from Toronto right now to Porter Airlines also flies into Deer Lake as well. So
yep.
That's what the bulk of what we're seeing, those connecting flights through Toronto direct to Deer Lake.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So basically flying in there, and then you have a full week at the lodge. And are people, when they come there, is it typically most folks are really focusing on Atlantic salmon, or are you trying to focus on brook trout? Are there streams that really you can just target brook trout, or is it mostly Atlantic salmon?
Yeah, so we provide licenses, salmon and trout. Focus is on the salmon, but at the same time, the area offers great trout fishing as well. As Rod mentioned there are areas of the lake here, 14 miles long, where you're fishing for salmon, and that trout just comes up and decides that, no, you're fishing for me now. And then, of course, a little trip north, 40 minutes, brings you up to a place called River Ponds as well, that you've probably heard of Lee Wulff fish. A lot of our clients who come appreciate the fact that we take them up in that area so they can, see that area as well. There's a salmon interpretation center in a place called Hawke's Bay, which is a short distance past River Ponds, where there's actually a salmon ladder and a counter, and you can actually visibly see these fish going up through there, which we've had some clients this summer that really enjoyed that as well. And we've even had clients, Dave, who tame the ocean waters for the food fishery for Atlantic codfish. So we also provide that if they're interested to go out in the ocean and try for codfish as well. So we offer a little bit of everything there. It all depends. We kind of leave it up to you as the client, basically to verbalize to us what it is you want, and that's the goal, is to please you and give you an experience and a taste of Newfoundland that you otherwise wouldn't have, right?
Yeah, and I think that would be cool as I think about this, setting up a trip. And we typically try to set things up with small groups to come up, but I would be thinking, okay, Atlantic salmon for sure, that would be it. And when you're talking to somebody, you're talking to them on the phone and talking about the trip, balancing expectations. That's always something I think any guide will talk about. But what do you tell them on the phone? Like they're saying, oh man, I want to get Atlantic salmon. Or they, do you tell them, like steelheads, you can get skunked any day of the week, right? Is Atlantic salmon the same thing? What are you telling them?
So what I'm going to do, Dave, is I'm just going to pass it over to Rod because during the off season, Rod does a lot of communication with our clients, whether it be via email or phone calls, and he's had a lot of discussions. So I'm going to let him answer that one for you.
Well, let's do that. Let's do a little role play here. I'll be the guy coming up. I'm, basically getting. I'm already in on this thing. I want to do it, but I'm asking you. Yeah, I mean, what is this going to look like? I'd love to catch at least a fish. What are my chances if I'm up there for 6 days?
Your chances of catching Atlantic salmon, 100%.
Really, 100%.
To catch a salmon, Atlantic salmon?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, of course, Dave, there's many things comes into play. Your ability to fish, if you're an experienced fisherman, like you say, your fish steelhead, so you can cast, I assume.
Right. Yeah. What about that person that's maybe struggling, like we said, maybe isn't the best caster, is kind of new, maybe has never fished Atlantic salmon or steelhead. They fished a little bit of trout, but they want to get one. What are their chances?
Okay. Good. This first year, which was the year before last year, this season passed, but the season prior to that, Tim and Kelly came. So that is Tim and his wife, Kelly. Kelly or Tim had never caught Atlantic salmon before. So I spent most of my time with Kelly because of the conditions of the water. Just, in case somebody fell in the river, you just want to be by their side. And that week, she hooked the most fish that was hooked out of all the clients, the 8 clients that were there. So she was by no means the best caster, but you know what she did? She listened to the things that I told her, and she had a great, great week. So if you're not experienced at casting, it can be trying if the wind conditions are up. She was using her and her husband both single-hand rods. We do have a lot of spade casters, and that works as well. We've got the water for that. But personally, I prefer and recommend a single if you can cast, and usually a 9 weight. And I tell them that, and I would also suggest strongly to purchase locally tied flies, or if you're a tyer yourself, like I send patterns off to different people who tie, and we had a group this year who tied some awesome flies. I just send them photos and different things of the flies we use and the patterns. And when they come in, they're at least partially prepared as to what to expect. And they have had good success for people who never, ever caught. The guy this year, he had never seen an Atlantic salmon before. And he had a couple 12, 15 pounders, and that was the guy who lost the big fish. And he had never fished Atlantic salmon before, but he was pretty knowledgeable with the fishing. The presentation improved as the week went on, and his fishing improved.
Right. What's your typical cast? Like, how far does somebody have to cast this? Is it a 9-foot 9 weight? Is that the rod? How far would they have to cast that typically?
I use a 9-foot 9 weight, and I've caught fish 20 feet from me, 10 feet from me, and I've caught them as far as 60 and 70 feet from me.
16, so yeah. Talk about the runs. Let's say you find these run. I'm just picturing something. You're on river left. Are you casting out and across, downstream and across? Talk about how you're kind of hooking, swinging the fly.
Approximately 45 degrees across the river, and you let the fly swing across on that radius, on that arc. And that's generally when they take the fly, as it makes it swing across. Sometimes, Dave, that fish will hit that fly as it moves 6 inches as soon as they hit the water. And sometimes it'll be at opposite the end of the swing. Again, that's knowing where the fish lie, which the guys do. They're all experienced and very good at fishing themselves. But as a fisherman with no experience at Atlantic salmon, it's a couple of days to adjust and to listen to the guide, and you will have success guaranteed.
What is the first thing you do in the morning? For me, it's heating up a kettle and pouring it over Angler's Coffee. That's how I start my day. Angler's Coffee roasts some of the finest beans on the market, and every bag you purchase supports the fish species we all love. Joe at Anglers ensures every batch is roasted and ships within 48 hours for maximum freshness. And this month, the Woolies blend is still my favorite. Joe crafts this flawless dark roast that jumpstarts every day. Angler's Coffee has a blend for every taste, a roast sampler, and options for any brewing method you prefer. If you want to support fish conservation and enjoy exceptional coffee, now's the time to try it and sign up for a subscription. Visit wetflyswing.com/anglers to get your Angler's Coffee today. That's Anglers, Anglers. Make a change today. And so when you make that 45 cast down, you let it swing down, and then on the hang down below you. Talk about that. Do you let it hang for a little bit, and then do you just take a couple steps and move, or are you taking more than a couple steps? Talk about how you work the run.
All right, Dave, I've heard this lots from steelhead fishermen. So if I put a fisherman in a position where he can fish a lot of salmon lying in a certain area, I suggest to him to stay in the same position for a minimum of 1 hour.
Oh, wow. So don't move. Stay in that exact same spot.
Don't move. Like I've had people stand in one position like Kelly and hook 4 fish in from the same position and never move.
Oh, wow. So 4 fish in the same position. So are these fish like cycling through, or there's just a bunch of fish in one little pool?
It's a large pool, our own pool. It's very large. And the fish come in and they settle in areas where they use less effort, I would imagine, to stay in that position. And we have residents that stay there. We've still got a lot of fish in the river down there. And they'll actually spawn right at that pool where they're sitting, right at the lower end of it. Yeah. So if I put you in a position, you could be fishing over 25 or 30 fish. So that's why I encourage you to stay and fish the pattern where you're using and then switch out and try something different and maybe go to a bomber and a dry fly. And you will have the most success doing that. And we get a lot of, like I said, steelhead fishermen, Dave, who used to a cast or two and then a stip or so, and a cast and a stip. But no, that don't work well with Atlantic salmon here in Newfoundland, at least what I'm used to.
Yeah, because it is a little different. So you have these pools where the fish are, at least here, they're getting ready to eventually stage up and spawn because and talk about the timing. Is it a June, July, August, and then talk about that a little bit, and then when are they spawning?
They spawn in late fall, like in November, October, November, late, and they stay in the rivers all during the winter and the springtime. We have blacks or slinks that run out the river, and nobody fishes for these. But these fish are spent after winter and they're not feeding, and they're very, they will actually, the smelts, we have smelts that go in, which is a small fish, bait fish, and they'll start feeding again. A lot of clients don't understand that the Atlantic salmon, once he comes in the river, he won't eat anything. I don't know why. Nobody knows why they come to take a fly, I guess. But they do not eat. They'll nip that fly, but they won't ingest it like a trout. Does this make sense?
Yeah, maybe describe that a little more, what's going on here.
Well, I can't answer the question as why they come to the fly and why they take it, but if you let the fly and you didn't sit the hook, that salmon will not ingest that fly, not like a trout. A trout would a brook trout would try to eat the fly.
Right.
And a salmon would just, like a bomber, Dave, for example, you'll come up slowly and take the bomber and suck that bomber in. But if you don't sit the hook, you'll just release it.
Right. So talk about that. When you see a fish come up, you're sitting there, you're swinging your bomber, your riffle hitch fly down. You see the fish. Talk about how you set to make sure that you get a hook up.
Okay. As soon as you see the fish break the water for the fly, you need to sit back the hook. And I don't mean like overly aggressive, but you need to sit the hook back because we use all barbless hooks, and probably you're aware of that.
Yeah.
And if you're in an area in the mouth where there is a bone or area, you need to sit it back. Otherwise, the hook's just going to nick that salmon, and you won't come back for the fly again if you do that. So if you don't sit the hook, which this year, again, we had a lot of issues with that because, like, the first day or two, they didn't understand that the fish won't take it and run with it. You'll just come and make that. Sometimes they make an aggressive swing, Dave, and they will actually hook themselves. But some more times, the big fellows will come and they'll make a slow rise for the fly. And as soon as you see them take that fly, you need to sit that hook.
Is it like a set? Is it kind of like a trout set? Just pull up on the rod and you set the hook? Like,
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
If you're on river left, swinging the fly down, would you set the hook, like, would you want to point your rod more upstream and set it up or straight up? Or, are you trying to hook him in the side of the mouth? Describe that a little bit.
Just straight back over my shoulder. Like, if I'm right-handed fishing, I just back over my right shoulder with a couple of feet, sit back with the rod. That's all is required.
Yeah, okay. And when they hit, or when they say you get a hookup, what is that like? Are these fish running right away? Do sometimes they sit down? Are they jumping? What does that experience look like?
Okay, so they're all individuals. Some will hit the hook and they're gone right away. And jumping, and some jump 8-10 times. Some fish jump once, twice. Some will sit there for a while, the big fellows. Sometimes they'll sit there for 5 or 10 minutes before they decide to run. Usually in early season, like June and July, they're usually pretty acrobatic as far as jumping and running.
Gotcha. This is awesome. And I guess, we're definitely, like always, we won't be able to hit on everything today, but I want to make sure not to miss anything. I want to do a quick little kind of our listener shout-out segment. Obviously, we've been talking about Calvin here, but today this is presented by Stonefly Nets, which is our net partner, and they're awesome. We're doing an event with them on the White River, fishing with Chad Johnson down there for streamers. So that's our big trip. I'm curious, as we kick this off, to start to take us out of here, what do you guys, what does that look like for nets? Are you guys using a net? How are you landing these giant? If you get a 15 or 20 pound fish, what does the landing look like?
Well, most of the clients we have are very good. They don't want photos with the fish. Some do. If they require a photo, we have a large rubber nets that we net the fish, and we try to keep the fish in the water. If they like to raise the fish above, then you need to be ready for the photo. And this needs to happen in 1 or 2 seconds and put it back down. I recommend keeping the head in the water, but I recommend releasing it.
Yeah.
But if you want a photo, that's not a problem. If the water temperature's 20 or above Celsius, I definitely recommend no. You either reach down and unhook the fish or bust it off. Like this summer, our water was low and our temperatures were up, and I was using a 4-pound test leader for a lot of the clients.
Oh, wow.
Especially the clients who didn't want a photo. It's a lot easier on the fish.
So you use 4-pound tippet.
I went to a 4-pound this summer, yes, but normally I would use an 8 tippet or a 6.
Right. And what does 4 do? Why use 4?
Why use 4?
Yeah.
When the water is really low, the temperatures are up, and I use small number 12 flies, and I find the fly will swim better with a number 4 tippet.
Yep.
And if you want to bust a fish after you're playing for 3 or 4 minutes, then you can bust them off easy.
Oh, right. So if you have a 4-pound tippet and you get a big fish, a 25-pound fish, your chances of landing that fish are probably pretty slim.
Your chance is 0.
Yeah, 0.
I did land an 18-pounder on a 4-pound one day a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's cool. We have a similar thing in our rivers with the summer steelhead that, occasionally you'll catch a steelhead fishing for trout, and you'll be on trout gear.
Yeah.
But those fish aren't 20 pounds. That might be a 12-pound fish would be a big steelhead there.
Dave, if you come in, if I was a client that came in and had a 20 or 25-pounder, I'd like a photo. Yeah, we've got no problem with that. But like I tell the clients, like the fish should be priority.
Yeah, But yeah, no, it's interesting. So, well, this is good. Maybe let's just go around here, Les or Ryan, as we're, starting to take it out of here in a bit. Anything we missed about, the experience? We talked a little about fishing, but anything you want to highlight here?
Well, just for me, this is Les again.
Yeah.
When Rod talked about the 100%, of catching a fish, I guess what I got to say is if anybody didn't get a fish, they had the chance. The fish came, and we had clients with the fish just not coming the one time, but a few times, and they just never hooked a fish. And it all goes back to experience and the different water conditions, stuff like that. But I guess just to reiterate from my point, I think Rod can vouch for the same. What we find with the fishing is the riffling hitch, and the presentation and the fish coming for that fly versus a fish coming a foot underwater for a fly. For us, the thrill is all about seeing that fish when it comes for the fly.
Yeah, I think that's what it's. I mean, that's one thing that separates it for sure. And even on the numbers, we've talked a lot about, as we've covered episodes all around the country, really world, but we've talked about, because of climate change and things like that, the effects. I mean, we've talked about brook trout and, issues down in the States and in Atlantic salmon. I mean, it sounds like, are you guys seeing ups and downs? I mean, I'm sure you see ups and downs, but are you seeing drastic issues on anything where some years it sounds like if you're getting 100% chance of a shot at a fish, you're probably pretty consistent. But have you seen any effects of climate change or changes in fish runs?
Well, I think what we're seeing most of all, Dave, is the temperature, the water temperatures. And I guess when I talk about that, is not just in the rivers themselves, the lakes, but the ocean. The ocean itself is warming up. So, a newsflash a short time ago was all of a sudden on the west coast, on the east coast of Canada, they're starting to put signs on the beaches for sharks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, things are moving around with the different temperatures in the water. And we got the Atlantic lobster now that's getting caught right here where we live. That was tagged whenever in Nova Scotia. And those things are moving further north to the colder water, right?
Yep.
So definitely there's an impact. I mean, it's all you got to do is look at the news every day to see what's happening in the world as regards to weather and impacting on everything, for sure.
But like you said, the chances are if we were to book a trip with you, it's likely that, in any given year, we'd probably have a shot at some fish, this sounds like.
Yeah, well, as Rod mentioned, not this season now, which is just ending now, but I'll say last year was a poor year for salmon numbers. But out of all the clients that we had show up here, I think we were pretty close to everybody hooking a fish, more than one fish, and who didn't hook a fish had the chance to hook a fish.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, is like Les said, numerous chances to hook the fish. And just to go back to Calvin, the first year, it was a learning experience. This year, his fishing improved drastically.
Oh, right. Yeah, the second year, like anything. And I'm sure you guys get some returners. Is that, do you have, let's just talk about that. I mean, it is August now, 2024. As we look out, to next year, is there an opportunity? Will you guys have some spots available for people if they were interested, or do you guys fill up pretty quick?
I do believe Calvin hooked 17 fish this year. And I've got it in my logbook. I keep a logbook every year of myself fishing and the fishermen, the clients that we have. And I think it was 17 this year. And I think 12 to 14 were large fish.
Yeah. Wow.
Am I correct in saying that, Les?
I think the number 17 is pretty close, yes. I think it was 17. I was thinking about 15, but thinking now, yeah. I think it was 17. And he had a great trip, obviously. Some fantastic fishing. And there is room for bookings. Ryan, if you're still on the end there, you can probably comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, so Dave, what we try to do here, we look at mid-June, around the 20th of June, and book for Sunday to Sunday usually is what we book for. What we aim for is 6 anglers per week. We can do 8, if there's a group, obviously, of 8 friends or family or whatnot that want to come, we can certainly make that work. But if there's not a group, usually if it's individuals, I'll say we usually aim for 6. but we can do a group of 8, and that's you talk about the proximity. Well, it's basically you get to Toronto. It's a 2.5-hour flight to Deer Lake, and then a short 2-hour drive here. So it's far, but it's close, and it gives you a taste of Newfoundland hospitality. As Dad and Rod explained, you know what they expect with the fishing. The weather, obviously, is the weather. So that's something that anyone, wherever you go, would have to contend with. But we usually start taking bookings. Right now, we have bookings already for next season, so that's good. But again, I can't encourage, if you're interested in coming up and spending some time with us, book as soon as possible. And again, I think you have my contact information there, Dave. If you want to share that for any bookings, you can just send it along.
I will. I'll put a link in the show notes to that so people can reach out to you. And this is awesome. And so basically,
and Dave, if I could just add one more thing. You talk about the history of this place. There was a gentleman here, Henry Green. He was from Virginia. Henry came here back, I believe it was in the 50s, the first time, 1957. And he continued to come here right up until 2022, I believe it was.
Oh, wow.
And he's since passed, I believe his age was 94. A big part of his trips, he would come for 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime. He would stay at one of our cottages. He had a lot of history, and he was an avid bird watcher, and also loved the salmon fishing. I'll send you a link, actually, on a short video we did of Henry. And he spent a lot of time on the river, made a lot of friends, and we miss him a lot here. Some of your listeners very well may have heard of Mr. Green. He spent a lot of time, I believe, on the Marguerite.
Yeah, Marguerite.
Yeah, in New Brunswick as well. Basically a month here and a month there. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the history of Henry Green on this property as well for your listeners. And again, one last thing, my son, he's 15 right now. He absolutely loves the fishing. Dad and Rod have kind of took him under their wing in the summertime, and a lot of the clients who come up get to meet Brody, and he makes a lot of friends with him. So we have something to offer for all ages as well when it comes to the river, and that's important, obviously, for conservation and the education piece to get more youth involved with it.
Right. That's critical. Definitely. That's good to hear. Are there, we're talking fly fishing today, are people fishing for Atlantic salmon up there with like conventional gear, or is it mainly fly fishing?
Just fly fishing.
Just fly fishing, yes.
Yeah. So you're not seeing, it's interesting because, down in areas around in the U.S. for steelhead, there's a lot of people fishing with conventional gear, probably a lot more than fly. But why is it up there? Why do you think that is? Do you see any conventional gear for anything, or is it always just been, fly has always been the king there?
Fly fishing is the only way I fish Atlantic salmon is fly fishing. As far as I know, years ago, there used to be salmon nets that the locals would have, like in the ocean.
Oh, right.
But that's been depleted now for years and years, many years. So the only fishing for Atlantic salmon now would be with an artificial fly in the rivers. You're actually not allowed to fish salmon in the ocean.
Oh, okay. You can't fish them in the ocean. Gotcha. Okay.
Any non-scheduled waters now, you cannot retain a salmon, like if you're outside of a scheduled river or the ocean. So there's been a lot of work done to try to improve, like the cod traps, which used to, for codfish, you used to catch lots of salmon. So those things have been banned for years.
Do you have any idea, these fish that are coming into the Portland Creek area, how far they're going out into the ocean? Are they going out there thousands of miles, or are they just hanging closer in? I know that's kind of a more of a biology or high-level question in fish life history, but I didn't know if you guys had any idea.
Well, from my reading about it, a lot of the salmon go back to Greenland, and they migrate back up in the same rivers, as you know, Dave.
Yep.
Like if they use Portland Creek River from being hatched, then they come back year after year after year.
Yeah, they do.
And they travel many miles, many predators, and But it's been a good year this year at Portland Creek. We've had probably as many big fish as I've seen in the river for a number of years, which is what you need for reproduction.
Yep. This is it. Okay, and then maybe Ryan, you could talk a little bit. I just want to touch on anything else we missed on, things outside. I know you guys have the lodge there, the lodging and all that stuff. Other than fishing, anything else we missed that people would love? Just getting the experience of, kind of Newfoundland when they come there. People come there for all sorts of things, just the natural beauty. Maybe give us a heads up there.
Yeah, so, Newfoundland is certainly a place of mystery, fun, and adventure, Dave. People come from all over the world. As I mentioned, Gros Morne National Park is just to our south, about 20 minutes from here. There's a UNESCO World Heritage Site there, Western Brook Gorge boat tours, a number of hiking trails which are extremely popular, and also cultural events that you can get in on. Camping is a big thing here on the west coast of the island. It's the most rugged part of the island of Newfoundland. A lot of locals call it the best coast. It's very full of mountains. In the wintertime, of course, it's great snowmobiling activities on the go. But in the summer, for those summer months, fishing is extremely popular here. And again, I can't stress enough, if someone like yourself were coming here, we would certainly engage you at a very early stage with some information. And we've had people come here for a couple weeks and they only wanted the 1 week fishing package. And then for the other week, they used it to explore the area right along the west coast of the island. And of course, the irony, Dave, of all of this is I remember Dad mentioned earlier about the DC-3s flying in from Gander International Airport. Of course, many of your listeners probably, I don't know if they've heard of it, the Broadway show Come From Away, which goes back to obviously the terrible incident on 9/11 where a bunch of our American friends were forced to touch down in Gander for safety reasons, obviously. And there's been a lot of connections and that communication back and forth. Everyone I talk to just certainly enjoys their time when they come here. And we certainly do our best, whatever we can do to make the trip, make it feel like home for someone coming here. That's what we aim to do right from the time they get off the plane in Deer Lake to meeting our staff here at the main lodge, and then subsequently when they have their meet and greet with the guides. So it's a very hands-on approach, and the customer service piece of it is huge. In particular, as I mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of this journey now for going on 30 plus years, and just looking really forward to seeing where we can take it. And like Lee Wulff said, give that other person the chance and opportunity to experience what Lee Wulff had when he showed up here all those years ago.
Right. Do you think, looking back on Lee Wulff when he was there compared to now, other than the roads, and I'm sure there's been some changes, how similar is it now to what it was like when Lee was there, do you think?
So I would say, Dave, it's extremely similar, to the point where basically where we fish here, there's a very remote location. It's not far from the main building to a spot where we call down around the loop. And that was where Lee would have had all of his little cabins, his lodge. And we've actually built a little replica cabin on the very spot where Lee Wulff had his cabin.
Oh, wow.
Where Alan and Barry, his two sons, actually are holding, there's a picture where they're holding a salmon with that cabin in the background. And there's a fairly large salmon, probably 30-pounder at least. And in that same area, of course, there was the cookhouse, where Dad and Rod, don't think they mentioned this earlier, but this is the first spot they ever tried watermelon when they were little boys at the cookhouse that Lee would have had come in for the clients back in the day. So there's a lot of history here. We try to, whenever we do anything here, we're actually putting a little salmon hut to get in out of the weather for the clients now, right on the bank of the river. And we're actually calling it the Pipeline Tilt. And the reason we have it called that is the pipe that Lee Wulff used to get the water from the brook to supply his camps. Well, that pike was still there when we went to put that little cottage there, right? So whenever any clients come up now, they'll be able to get a warm up or in out of the elements at the pipeline tilt. So whenever we do anything here, we always try to keep the story of Lee Wulff preserved and minimize any destruction to the property. Everything is done with keeping that history and cultural significance in mind for Lee.
That's awesome. And what does it feel like for you, Ryan, now being kind of taken over and being, owning and running the operation? How does that feel? Has this been something where, most of your life that's kind of been something you've been thinking about or how does that feel?
So Dave, I absolutely love this place. The biggest thing for me is to see how happy it makes my son. He's 15. He absolutely loves fishing. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that he takes over this whenever he's ready. And our goal, again, is to make sure that client satisfaction and to give somebody the opportunity to come here and experience Portland Creek. I think it's a great spot. I think it's one of the best rivers on the west coast of Newfoundland, and if not, one of the best rivers in Atlantic Canada. And of course, I'm so blessed to have Dad and Rod there to help me with their experience with the fishing, and also very blessed to have a great supporting staff with the workers at Mountain Waters when it comes to the accommodations and meals piece of it. So there's a full team effort. And like I said, I think anyone who comes here, I think they would certainly relish in the history and the significance of this spot. We had a gentleman here this summer, and I walked down one day. His name is Brian, and I said, "Brian, you're not fishing today?" And the wind was up a little bit. And he said, "I just fished for 5 days," he said, "and I absolutely love it here." He said, "I love it here so much," he said, "I'm going to sit down here all day and just watch everyone else fish." And that's exactly what he did. And he literally took it all in. He was kind of in a little sense of awe, I believe, just to have the opportunity. And when I brought Brian back to Deer Lake, he unequivocally said, in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, "I'll be back." and we're looking forward to that. And again, Dave, as you know, through podcasts such as this, and not only, but the most important thing is those connections you make on the riverbank, on the river's edge, and the stories that are told. And Kelvin has been here now for a couple years in a row, and I consider Kelvin a great friend, and just so blessed that he was able to experience what Portland Creek has to offer through Dad and Rod. And I think when you talk to Kelvin, he'll certainly confirm that for you or for anyone else who he may run across on a river somewhere.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, we have a kind of a group, or we call it the shop, but it's we're just kind of re-kicking this off. But it's folks like Calvin that are in this group, and it's a chance to basically build our the best trip each year, right? Work together and build trips. So this is going to be one where I think we'll talk about it in the group and probably have some more interest, I'm sure, from people moving ahead. But yeah, guys, this has been great. I think we'll have to stay in touch, obviously, and hopefully I'll be able to see you maybe on the water down the line. And we'll send everybody out to mountainwatersresort.ca if they have questions, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. But yeah, you guys, I appreciate everything you're doing. It really sounds amazing, and excited to stay in touch and hopefully see you guys in person.
Dave, on Ryan's site, Mountain Waters, I think my contact is there, like my email, or if my phone number is not, and somebody wants to email or call and discuss the fishing further, then please tell them to feel free to do so.
Great. And Rod, appreciate your time today. We'll hopefully, it sounds like you're going to probably be on guiding for many years to come. Is that true?
Yes. I love fishing so much. I get to go fishing now, just the early season, the earlier rivers around the province. And I haven't made the trip to Labrador in the last couple of years, but I'll definitely be around if you show up.
Yeah, perfect. All right, guys. Well, we'll be in touch. Thanks again, and looking forward to talking soon.
Thank you, Dave. Take care. All the best.
All the best.
All right, your call to action. Check in with the guys. Check in right now. There will be an email for Ryan in the show notes. Do that now. And if you want to book this trip with them, you could also check in with me. We're going to be putting this together hopefully in the coming year. And check in with me. We've got the shop. That's the best place if you want to get in on these trips when we do our program. You got to check in with the shop. Go to wetflyswing.com/the shop is one place you can go to, or wetflyswing.com/pro. And if you get involved there, that's your best chance to get on these trips that we have coming up. All right, we do have another trip coming up here, Schultz Outfitters. We're heading out for smallmouth bass. If you're interested in this, send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and put Schultz Outfitters in the subject line, and I'll follow up with you on availability. This is going to be an epic trip to one of the great places with one of the greatest outfitters in the country. You are going to have your game on if you connect with this trip. So let me know if you're interested. All right, I got to get out of here on to the next big thing today. Hope you have a great morning, a great afternoon, or a great evening, wherever in the world you are. And I look forward to talking to you on that next episode. See you then.